Hello, this is video 8 in an 11-part series on the French Revolution and Napoleon. And in today's video, we're going to begin talking about Napoleon. We'll basically just take a look at who he was and how he got into a position of power in France. So here we go. Now, overall, as we take a look at Napoleon, we're going to talk about, in essence, the rise and fall of Napoleon, because in a lot of ways, about as quickly as he rose from obscurity to be the central figure for France, he would fall back, maybe not into obscurity, but would certainly fall from power. As I said before, in today's video, though, the focus is going to be to just talk a little bit about who Napoleon was and a little bit about how he came to power in France. So going back to childhood times, Napoleon was actually born in a place called Corsica, a small island in the Mediterranean. As a boy, he was sent to military school at the age of 9 and participated in military school to its conclusion when he was 16 years old. He wasn't necessarily a distinguished student or anything like that, but he did have training that was available for somebody his age that would potentially prepare him for a career in the military. And that is something that he would be known for. That's really where he makes his mark, is in his time in the military. And then even when he was leading France, a big part of what he would do would be to command the French military. Now, as far as the French Revolution was concerned, he was 20 years old when the French Revolution began. And when an army began to be developed during that time, he quickly joined up and began participating in that as a soldier. Now, as the first years went by, he simply was a participant in the French military, nothing that necessarily distinguished him from anybody else for quite a few years. But one of the things we'll see about Napoleon is when he gets an opportunity to make a name for himself, or when he gets an opportunity to become recognized for something, he seemed to be pretty good at seizing that opportunity. So the opportunity he ends up getting to really make a name for himself and become a prominent military person is in 1795. The National Convention was meeting, and word came that there were a group of royalists, or people who supported a return to monarchy, who were threatening to disrupt the convention. And so he was ordered to put a stop to that. And he ends up putting together a successful defense of the National Convention. One of the phrases you sometimes hear associated with it is, with a whiff of grape shot. He was able to preserve the National Convention, and that's just a reference to using cannons, and instead of a large cannonball, think sort of like what might come out of a shotgun shell, many small miniature cannonballs, I guess you could say, and was able to shoot that down the street, stop the royalists in their tracks, and thus save the National Convention and the delegates that were inside. And through that, he was able to get better opportunities to actually command men in the French army. And as I was saying before, he did a good job of taking advantage of opportunities. So there were some cases where he took men into battle and had great success. And when that was the case, he did a really good job of publicizing that and made sure people knew about those successes and knew about his role in those successes. But there were also times when he was not particularly successful. He led the army into Egypt, for example, at one point, and was pretty badly defeated by Horatio Nelson and England. Yet he managed to keep that information out of the press, and people didn't really hear about that pretty dramatic failure. So as the years went by, and as he got to 1799, so several years into having the opportunity to serve as a general and to have a prominent role in the French military, if you made a reference at that time to the general, people knew who you were talking about. They knew you were talking about Napoleon. And so not only was he growing to be a popular figure just in general in France, but especially popular for the men that served underneath him. Even though the greatest loyalty was supposed to be to France itself, I think it's safe to say that many, if not the vast majority, of people who served under him felt strong ties to him and would probably do anything that he asked. And that'll lead in really to the opportunity that he had to seize power in France. In the previous video, when we talked about the Directory, we talked about how it brought a moderating force to France and really kind of calmed things down for a few years, but eventually would start becoming corrupt and be on the verge of fizzling out. And it's during this time when the Directory was struggling that Napoleon will seize the opportunity to take power in France. Now, he'll do this with what is called a coup d'etat. I always like to refer to it as a coup d'etat. Sometimes it's kind of fun to intentionally mispronounce words, but do make sure that if you see that reference or you make that reference, you pronounce it correctly. Coup d'etat. Anyway, what this really stemmed from was the fact that people who were very supportive of him, especially more higher ups, more prominent folks within France, basically told him, the time is right. If you want to assert control and gain control of France, this is a great time. And so basically what happened is he, along with loyal soldiers loyal to him, surrounded the building, quite literally surrounded the building where the national legislature was meeting, and basically made their presence known and made their intentions known that they were going to seize power. And because of the popularity of Napoleon, because of the reality of the situation that many of those legislative people were facing, the vast majority of them just simply walked out. And so without any literal violence, power began to transfer from the national legislature towards Napoleon and those directly supporting him. Now, there were a few that remained, and as their last act under the Directory, they made a decree or made a change whereby in the French government there would be 3 consuls, as they called them, kind of a look back to Rome. And Napoleon took the title of first consul. And so in a very official way, power transferred from the Directory as a style of government to this consul type government with Napoleon in the lead. And Napoleon would, from this point forward, effectively serve as a dictator in France. Now, when we get into the next videos, I'll talk a little bit more about what that actually looked like and the changes that he would make. But one of the things that made it work, at least at this point, and again, by this point, we're talking November of 1799, and then moving forward when this coup d'etat takes place, is that the people of France basically supported Napoleon. And it's a good example of it doesn't really matter what the rules are for government or how things are supposed to be. If people like what's going on, they're going to support it. And at least for the first several years in France, with Napoleon assuming a power role, he was well received and well liked. And so again, we'll get more into some of the changes that he will make in France in the next video. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. Thanks for watching.